Yorkshire, the heart of the miners' strike. Traditionally, these pit villages have had friendly relations with their local police. But after the battles on the picket line, some Yorkshire mining communities now resent and hate the police. In others, there's a marked and surprising contrast. Despite all the anger, police and miners are managing to get along. World in Action has talked to a large number of the country's most senior policemen who've been at the sharp end of the miners' strike. Many of them believe that the different views of the police in mining villages can largely be explained by different police tactics on the picket lines. Private disagreements are emerging among police chiefs about the handling of the strike, one of the biggest police operations ever mounted. Recently, the violence has taken a sinister turn. Attacks on working miners, destruction of their houses, and most shocking of all, the murder of Welsh taxi driver David Wilkie. Here, the police task is not in doubt, finding those who committed the crimes. But the mass picketing has presented more controversial problems. Tonight, we report on the different police tactics in two adjoining counties at the heart of the strike: West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire, two areas where mining communities share the same commitment to the strike, but have arrived at quite different views of the police. Midnight at West Yorkshire Police Force's headquarters in Wakefield. The first units are being dispatched throughout the country. One possible flashpoint is Welldale Colliery at Castleford. 2 days before, there'd been burning barricades. The pit offices had been broken into and ransacked. But now an unlikely alliance has been formed.
Now, those miners who are on strike have said, both to us and to the management, that they would like to, in fact, police their own colliery to prevent damage happening there.
Down at Welldale, it's quiet, and the police have agreed to withdraw.
We are responsible enough to look after our own pit. So they've agreed to that, and we've agreed to patrol the pit, like they says. But there again, at 3:30 morning, when we know them scabs are going to come in, and I mean they are scabs, the police will obviously come, but our NUM force will be here to try and prevent them in any possible way to stop them going in pit.
Just after 4 in the morning, Assistant Chief Constable John DeMail checks in with the Welldale pit manager.
Morning, Colin. Morning, John. Hi. All right? Yeah, fine, thanks. What's it been like?
Throughout the strike, West Yorkshire's tactics on the picket lines have been overseen by DeMail. At Welldale this morning, 6 working miners are expected.
Yeah. Well, we're almost ready to roll this morning.
Outside, the ritual of the night is underway. About 100 pickets have arrived, kept away from the pit entrance by uniformed police. DeMail makes his mark with local pickets.
Anyway, you all right this morning? Are you all right this morning? Oh, yeah.
Maintaining relations with the pickets is critical to West Yorkshire's strategy.
Well, up to now, they've been pretty decent with us. You know, they've well, I wouldn't say they've controlled us, but we just behaved ourselves as a branch.
The working miners arrive. With the encouragement of the official pickets, their fellow miners try to shove their way through the police cordon. In fact, the pickets could walk through a clear gap to the side, but the ritual of the shove is more important. One picket is arrested. DeMail would prefer that not to have happened. In an instant, it can sour the atmosphere, which resembled a rugby match more than a picket. Many policemen in mining areas have felt uneasy about their role in the strike. Often they come from mining communities and have some sympathy for the miners' cause. Some senior officers dislike being caught in the middle of the confrontation between the government and the miners, when their real job is to police the community and keep its support.
Here we have a dispute that I'm not very happy about. I'm not very happy that we have to be involved in, but at the end of the day, it's going to end. The whole thing will come to a full stop, God willing, very soon. It might be tomorrow, it might be several months, but one day it will happen. And I and my officers will be left with the bits and pieces to pick up. I am not prepared to submit to mob rule. But on the other hand, I say, there will be occasions when I have to remember that I am policing communities that I'll have to police at the end of the day.
West Yorkshire have become known as the softly, softly police force. They see their role on the picket line as defensive. Every morning at every pit, whether or not violence is expected, whether or not there's been violence at that pit the day before, police start off in ordinary uniform. West Yorkshire's chief training officer is Superintendent David Clarkson.
Suppose, for example, you have a rowdy picket. It's essentially peaceful, but it's rowdy. A couple of stones then start coming. What's your response to that?
We would not react at all. We would still remain as normal policemen.
At what point do you start to deploy defensive gear?
Really, it is down to the ground commander or the tactician at the scene. And if that stone throwing or abuse or whatever becomes so vociferous that more positive action is required, then it is his decision. And he has got to bear in mind the policy that is given by the chief constable. That we are community policemen at heart. If he does things slightly wrong, then the wrong end result will take place.
What do you mean?
Well, if, for example, we've been talking earlier about putting men into riot gear at the wrong time. If that ground commander does exactly that, then the problem arises that we have a riot when really, if things had been taken a little bit slowly, then it would not have occurred.
6 a.m. at Denby Grange pit near Wakefield. Police say 400 pickets from different areas have gathered.
There are so many people out the other side of that police line at the moment that they could push the police line back, and I really only put the horses there to remind them that we're not going to be pushed back. Right? We're not going to be pushed back. They stand where they are and picket peacefully.
West Yorkshire have strict rules about the use of horses. If used to disperse a crowd, they first nudge against the pickets sideways. If this fails, they can walk through the crowd. Charging is prohibited, even trotting is ruled out.
We find, and this is why we've got to be so careful, for example, if we use horses, which we normally use at football matches anyhow, where we have very few problems with the use of horses, but if we use those same horses in a picket situation, and we, for example, instead of just walking, they trot. In some picket situations, that can cause an offensive aggression by the pickets.
Denby Grange has been a key test of West Yorkshire's softly, softly strategy. On October the 29th, 44 policemen were injured trying to hold back a picket of 3,000 people. Stones were thrown, but riot gear was not used until the last moment because ground commanders thought it would result in even more injuries. The tactics require great patience by the men on the ground.
You've been using the softly, softly policy now throughout the strike. What's your assessment of it? Is it working or is it not working?
Well, where there's been mass pickets at Denby Grange, the biggest we've seen, really, it has worked in the long run. It has worked.
There's been some mornings when
we've had
1,500 and 3,000 have come and they've just walked away and there's been nothing.
We stand and take a lot more than other forces do.
Just before 7, 200 working miners are expected shortly. Police say there's over 1,000 pickets and police dogs have arrived to guard the pit perimeter.
Are you anxious at the moment?
A little.
What is it about this particular picket that makes you a little anxious?
Well, it is always likely to be difficult when you've got people that come from many different parts of the country.
Why is that exactly, do you think?
Well, I think that people are always are better behaved when they're working on their own ground.
Does the same argument apply to the police here?
Yes, I think it does.
When you're talking to the pickets, they don't like it at all. They prefer it to stay local. But in view of the numbers of pits that have gone back and the number of pickets that are turning up, there's no way that can happen.
And the other police forces, they think we're policing in a different way to where they've been before, South Yorkshire particularly.
It's hard. We were talking to some lads from Northants yesterday, and it's hard for them. They've been in Nottinghamshire, where as soon as the word scab shout and they can start taking prisoners, coming up here and having to then alter to our system of policing.
As dawn breaks, nearly 200 working miners arrive at Denby Grange. Sometimes this can be a signal for confrontation, but this morning the crowds dispersed peacefully. Some pickets left a parting gift, a barricade across the road with timber taken from the local woodyard. It's a small matter to Mr. Domail.
Well, I feel that it was a successful operation in that no miners were injured, no policemen were injured, there were no arrests, and something of the region of 200 miners went to work.
West Yorkshire has seen relatively little violence during the strike. Next door in South Yorkshire, the picture could hardly be more different. The county has seen the worst and most continuous violence of the strike. There is widespread hostility to the police among mining communities. The contrast is strikingly confirmed by the chairmen of the police committees, both Labour, both supporters of the miners, and both with totally different views of their police forces.
Well, the behaviour of the police has been deplorable in some cases. There's no doubt about it. It's been sheer hooliganism by yobs in uniform.
I think it's been done remarkably well under the circumstances. It's a very difficult position for the police to be in.
What is the feeling amongst the South Yorkshire mining communities about the police and the way they've been policed?
Bitter, very hostile. It'll take 20 years for them to forgive the police.
I think they've appreciated, by and large, the attitude of the police, the way they've handled the strike, the way they've handled the picket situation at the gates.
The mood among official pickets in South Yorkshire is different too.
Not the violence.
They had a sense of grievance which we did not find in West Yorkshire.
Last Tuesday when they brought him in 6:30, they took him through into Scabs in, and then he come out, Chief Superintendent, and he says, I'm giving you 5 minutes to disperse. He didn't give us 5 minutes, he just shouts, truncheons drawn, lad, the cameras have gone, get stuck in at him, give him some hazard.
I'll give you one example, what happened at our picket hut over across at number 3 yard. They tried to knock it down, it's been well built, and they failed, they couldn't knock it down.
Who tried to knock it down?
The police. So what they did, they went in, urinated and human excrement, all in the hut. Absolutely disgusting.
The night we visited South Yorkshire was, police said, the quietest for 3 or 4 months. Only a few miners braved the freezing temperatures. At Manvers Pit, north of Sheffield, there was a small crowd of pickets.
Obviously this has been the target pit for tonight as a result of what you've seen earlier on. It's been very quiet elsewhere. And basically they're quiet now awaiting the arrival of the escort in.
Riot police were concealed but ready to go in.
If the situation deteriorates and we have missiles or an indication of real violence, then we'll look at deploying protective equipment.
At 6, the working miners arrived. There was shouting, but the pickets dispersed peacefully. The stated policy of the Chief Constable in South Yorkshire is the same as his opposite number in West Yorkshire.
My instructions are that each day will start off by officers being in normal police equipment. It doesn't matter that the previous day that there's been extreme violence at that particular location. That matters not. We start each day afresh.
But there is one important difference. South Yorkshire commanders are allowed to deploy riot gear before trouble actually starts. Assistant Chief Constable Tony Clements has been in charge of South Yorkshire's handling of the pickets throughout the strike.
Well, certainly over a period we've begun to see certain indications when trouble is likely to occur, and yes, we have put on riot equipment before the stoning has occurred.
May 29th at Orgreave coking plant just outside Sheffield. Since the 1981 inner-city riots, every police force has been equipped with riot gear. This was the first time it was used in South Yorkshire. Arthur Scargill was determined to close the plant. South Yorkshire used the toughest tactics yet to stop him. Pickets were truncheoned as they tried to shove through. As police brought up reinforcements, the pickets started throwing missiles. The police went in, hard. But by afternoon, the picket was peaceful again. From a camera facing the police, it's possible to see how the day's second riot built up. A picket jokes with the police as he pretends to inspect them. Then the lorries arrive to fill up with coke, and the mood changes. 1 or 2 stones are thrown. Immediately, long shields are brought into the front line. At once, they attract a hail of rocks and stones. the police decide to go on the offensive. There's a parting of the shields, and out come the horses. The pickets run off across the fields, horses in hot pursuit. As they return, policemen bang and clap their shields in appreciation, like infantry applauding returning cavalry. Arthur Scargill had hoped to make Orgreave his Waterloo. By June the 18th, it had become a battlefield. West Yorkshire units were used at Orgreave. Their senior officers came away with deep unease about the South Yorkshire tactics and renewed commitment to their softly, softly approach. By late summer, some Yorkshire miners were returning to work. In South Yorkshire, the hard tactics continued and the hostility increased.
But doesn't the banging of riot shields by policemen add to that feeling of battle more?
Yes, it does. And any police action, if you're seeking to criticise it, can be called provocative. And the movement of police officers to deal with a situation developing in a mining village is seen as provocative. And I know if I was standing on the picket line there and I saw van loads of policemen suddenly appear, I wouldn't start to question the reason why they were there. I would just be, shall we say, critical of the fact that they were. Now, I feel that the banging on shields is provocative, and I've said it shall not happen.
Well, the banging of shields was a ploy that was used early on in the strike, and we stopped it. We saw that it was not necessary, probably provocative, and therefore the Chief Constable issued an instruction to say that shields wouldn't be banged, and that was the end of it.
Do you regret that that ploy was used?
Well, I'm not saying that I regret it, because it was something that we were doing because we thought it was right to do it. The officers thought it was right.
I don't like it. I stopped it because it doesn't achieve anything and it can be seen as provocative.
But it happened in June in Orgreave. It happened at Kiverton, I understand, in September.
Yes, it happened at Orgreave, and I didn't ban it then, but I did when it started to go into the villages and when you were dealing with much smaller numbers.
Kiverton Park Village became another test of strength between South Yorkshire miners and police. Now, like other mining communities, it's full of hatred.
We were one of the first parishes in South Yorkshire to set up a community bobby. Now then, we had a very high regard for this man. But now, especially the older end, and this is frightening, especially the older end, that's always had a very good regard for the police. They've seen the violence from both sides, and most of the violence has gone through this village, up round the old age pensioners' bungalows. They hate police because of what they've seen.
I was always brought up that I could rely on a policeman. If I wanted help, I could go to him. But now, no.
Chief Constable Peter Wright acknowledges the hostility.
It's very strong, certainly within some sections. I don't say the complete community, but if someone called a meeting in any of the mining villages in the heartland of the strike, it would be well attended, and all those people who were there would be there to criticise the police. They wouldn't be there to support us. It's got to be accepted that individual police officers have done things that they should not have done. I've got about 105 complaints against members of this force, which indicate that that is the case, and those complaints will be fully investigated. Now, once again, we've been at it for 9 months. Sometimes we get it wrong. We put too many policemen in. We misjudge the situation. We're working in the dark, I mean literally in the dark. We don't know particularly how many numbers are out there. All we know is that there's a hostile group of people who are throwing stones and seeking to cause injuries to police officers.
The police committees, the NUM officials, the pickets in West Yorkshire speak by and large favourably of the police. In South Yorkshire, it's completely the opposite.
Well, I don't know. You're telling me that. I don't know that that is the case. I think that the situation is exactly the same. The problems, the policing is exactly the same.
But some other forces believe their policing is different. And it's not just West Yorkshire. In Derbyshire, a split mining community and possible flashpoint for violence, police have also used softly, softly tactics. And despite mass picketing, there's been little trouble. Horses and riot gear have never been used in the strike. Today, the National Council for Civil Liberties published the most detailed report so far on the police and the miners. They claim South Yorkshire has taken a markedly different approach from its neighbours.
On the ground, one sees a much more aggressive and rough handling of pickets. There's much more use of riot police, helmets, shields. There's a much greater tendency, rather than to passively contain crowds, but to disperse them through the use of horses, dogs, batons. There's also much more use of arrests. One can only ponder what would have happened had there been an Orgrave at West Yorkshire. It is true to say that South Yorkshire is a more strategic area as far as the industrial dispute is concerned, but even allowing for that, the differences that we found are quite striking, and I certainly believe that much of it has to do with the way the dispute has been policed in those two areas quite differently.
There's a further important contrast between West and South Yorkshire. Both counties have similar numbers of miners, but South Yorkshire has a much smaller police force, just over 2,000 compared with 6,000. They've had to rely much more on police from other forces. We've heard many criticisms of outside forces, but a torrent of abuse against one force in particular: the London Metropolitan Police. The Met considers itself the elite force of public order policing.
Our policemen are used every day and every week in London to dealing with fairly major and fairly aggressive demonstrations. The way that they police those demonstrations attracts worldwide acclaim. I am aware that in the midst of all of this, there is still some feeling that the Metropolitan Policemen have a bad reputation.
Derbyshire Police sent several Met officers home after a late-night drinking incident in a mining village when a Met inspector challenged local miners to have a go. A number of senior policemen in mining areas have been angered by what they see as the high-handed attitude of some Met policemen.
I've seen Metropolitan Police spitting at people, kicking them on the shins, standing in front of them, smiling while they're doing it.
They were the originators of the goading and the baiting, like throwing coins in front of a picket and saying, "Come on, lad, let's have a go. Let's see how tough you Yorkshire bastards are."
The taunting is as regards them waving pay packets at us and saying this is a good thing for us. You know, while you're out on strike, we're getting overtime. We can afford holidays in Spain, Bermuda, one thing and another.
Church leaders, community leaders, people with enormous responsibilities in the everyday running of community life, these are the people who are pointing a finger at the Metropolitan Police.
They wear the white shirts. Everybody recognises the Mets. They're the most hated force on the picket line.
There is an amazing abundance of stories from people in the mining villages, miners, the community, from local politicians, and indeed from some of the provincial policemen themselves about the Met, all of them critical.
Yes, I'm aware of this feeling, but you really can't throw at me a bland fact that there's a lot of feeling about that. What I would respond to that is that there are only far fewer than 20 people felt so strongly that they felt they had to complain. I think there's one additional factor as well. Our policemen are uniquely identifiable up in the coal dispute. They're the only policemen who wear white shirts. And our policemen are also by far the largest number of policemen up there. And as I say, I think all of these factors put together tend to distort the picture.
I've heard criticisms expressed against forces that have come into South Yorkshire, that it's not the South Yorkshire officers, it's those who are coming in from elsewhere. Now, that is very, very unfair.
Would you have preferred to have been able to police the strike with your own men?
Oh, of course.
Why?
Well, because my own men know that they've got to police that area tomorrow, and that the manner in which they police it is going to affect the manner in which they're able to police it the next week when the strike is over.
The handling of the pickets is now the subject of major disagreements among policemen. Should they enforce the law rigidly and use hard tactics to disperse mass pickets, or should they just contain the crowds passively, using riot gear only as a very last resort, even if that means the law is sometimes broken? To West Yorkshire, the answer is clear. 2 weeks ago, their detectives arrested a number of people in connection with attacks on working miners. Their information came from miners out on strike. Police throughout the mining counties will need the community's help to deal with the new phase of violence. Their tactics on the picket lines may well determine whether or not they get it.